For the last 2 weeks, the strange story of multimillionaire Robert Durst has played out right here in New Orleans. The eccentric 71-year-old has been the focus of the HBO documentary, The Jinx, which chronicled his life and connection to 2 murders and 1 missing person, his wife. On the eve of the final episode on March 15th, Durst was arrested at the downtown hotel, the JW Marriott. He was wanted for a 2000 murder in Los Angeles. Cops there say he killed his longtime friend, Susan Berman, a woman investigators were set to meet and talk with about Durst's missing wife. But when the FBI raided Durst's hotel, they found a gun and marijuana, as well as cash and an elaborate mask. So now he faces gun and drug charges right here in New Orleans and is being held at a jail in St. Gabriel outside of Baton Rouge. To talk about the future of this case, we're joined now by defense attorney and legal analyst Robert Jenkins, former federal prosecutor Matt Chester, who's with the firm Baker Donaldson, and security expert Mike Kahn. Robert, let's just get right to you. Does it seem that Durst will stand trial on these drug and gun charges here in New Orleans before he's extradited back to Los Angeles?
I actually think that he's going to take a plea to get back to Los Angeles. It seems to be a slam dunk if the evidence is what it is down here. He'll take a plea with something less than 10 years because if he goes to trial and get convicted, he's definitely going to serve at least 10 to 15 years here. And I think he just want to get out of here.
The charges, Matt, are felon in possession of a firearm and also having a controlled and dangerous substance, marijuana, with the firearm. As a prosecutor, is this a case you look at and say, man, this is a slam dunk?
You know, we don't know everything the prosecutor has, but I would say it looks pretty good for the Louisiana prosecutors in this case. You know, to Robert's point, I think that's why he's probably going to want to deal with that first so he can deal with the more serious charges out in California.
Mike, a lot of stuff came out in court this past week during the search, during the raid at the hotel. You know a lot about this from dealing with people in the security industry, but when they raided his hotel room, it came out in court that Durst just let the officers or the FBI right in, and that's when they found the guns and the drugs. Does that kind of stuff hold up in court?
Well, it was actually a little bit different. What actually happened was they had been trailing him, and they had lost contact for about 4 days. He utilized his phone to get some voicemail. When he did do that, they were able to triangulate exactly where he was. So they set up for surveillance. They observed him come into the hotel in the lobby. They got up and started speaking with him. They asked him if he was Mr. Durst. He said no, he was not, and gave a bad name. They had pictures. They knew who he was. At this point, one of the federal agents contacted L.A., talked to them, and started getting everything prepared. Meanwhile, they continued to engage in conversation with Mr. Durst. They actually...
Keep going.
They actually spoke to him for about 20 or 30 minutes as he was free to leave at any given point. Mr. Durst then had a female walk up who had seen the HBO special. She then started talking to him and immediately recognized him from the special. They talked for another 20 or 30 minutes. At this point, the warrant then was put into NCIC by California, and they advised Mr. Durst he was under arrest. After they advised him that he was under arrest, they said, you're not going to be able to come back to the hotel. Do you want to get any of your belongings? He said, yes, I'd like to go to my room and get some. They went up to the room. As soon as they observed some of the narcotics, the gun, and some other evidence in plain view, they then held what they had and got a search warrant for the rest of the hotel room.
From a cop standpoint, is that all legal? Does this hold up in court? Is this a sound, by-the-book investigation?
Everything they did was 100% legal. They were very careful and took all the necessary steps to make sure that nothing could be thrown out.
But, Robert, you were in the court with us this week. Dick DeGuerin, who's a high-profile defense attorney, tried to get everything tossed out, making the argument that this wasn't a proper search. Does he have an argument in that case?
Not really. I mean, we try our best to get things suppressed and thrown out, but if you ever seen a show Law and Order, they throw out everything. That really doesn't happen in real life. If you go to court, it's very rare that things are suppressed. So I think, just like he said, it's going to be very difficult to get things thrown out, and I think he's going to take a plea to get out of here and handle his case in Los Angeles.
He's being held here without bond, Matt. Do prosecutors here, Leon Cannizzaro, talk and work with prosecutors in Los Angeles? Do they try to coordinate a strategy? And can they coordinate a good playbook going forward from here?
Yeah, I think what likely happens in these multi-jurisdictional prosecutions is you'll have high-profile folks, or I should say senior-level folks at Mr. Cannizzaro's office, talking with senior-level folks at the L.A. District Attorney's office. They're likely talking about the strength of their respective cases, the strength of the evidence in those cases, and they'll formulate a plan to determine which case should go forward, and they'll ultimately reach some sort of resolution on that.
You worked the Nagin case, the Broussard case. Somebody at court this week said this is the Al Capone theory. They may not get him on a sexy charge, but if you can get Durst on a lesser charge, gun and drugs, you still got him and he'll have to do jail time. Does the prosecution look at it from that standpoint?
Yes and no. I think that the prosecutor has evidence. The prosecutor here in Louisiana, for example, has evidence that he had, guns and drugs that he should not have had. And so they have evidence that he committed a crime, so they're going to do that. They shouldn't be influenced by what is going on in California. My guess is they probably won't be. They have evidence that he violated Louisiana law. They'll be prosecuting him for that, and they'll probably let the California authorities deal with the murder charges as they see fit.
Mike, Durst is being held in a jail in St. Gabriel, Hunt Correctional Center. He's considered a threat to himself and was moved to that facility. Is that common for such high-profile cases to be moved and also to be put, we understand, in protective custody so where he's not around other inmates?
Sure. Anytime you have a high-profile individual who's been arrested, there's always a potential for things to happen to him in general population or other areas. So they usually move him to a very secure environment when he's in a cell by himself, and he's usually watched 24 hours a day to make sure he doesn't harm himself or anyone else harms him.
Here's the...
Go ahead. About that, and one of the other aspects of it, when you have a high profile with money, the other inmates will flow to him, and he can get certain things done through these inmates because of the money they have, and that's why they also want to move him out. The money is key, and I've seen over a period of time where someone like him were able to do certain things because of the money, and other inmates would do it.
Well, let's talk about his health. He's in poor health. Dick DeGuerin, his high-profile defense attorney, has brought that up several times. Robert, is that something that he's trying to get on the record? And I hate to say get a sympathy plea, but to show the court that this man may not be in good health.
Well, they may be setting it up some type of mental insanity plea in terms of he's in poor health, he didn't know what he was seeing on the video and those things. So he's setting the stage for it because he has to counter what's going on in the public about all these alleged murders and what's happening in Vermont. So he's trying to play for that jury pool as well.
If you could talk about that too. As a prosecutor, if you see somebody who is in poor health, who may have a history of mental illness or maybe dealing with mental problems, how do you guys handle that?
Well, I mean, I think the characteristics of a particular defendant are something that you look at when you're a prosecutor and you're evaluating the strength of a case. But I think Robert's exactly right. He's, Mr. DeGuerin's doing what a good defense attorney does, and that is to humanize the defendant in the eyes both of the judge and the potential jury pool in the event a case here in Louisiana or in California goes to trial.
Let's move to the California case. As a police officer, and a former police officer, but somebody who's still very involved with police work, it appeared in the last episode of The Jinx that Durst gave what many people consider to be a confession on video. Is that something that cops look at and say, hey, you know what, we can use this at trial if we get it to trial in California for a murder case?
Absolutely. It was very important that the way it took place. He went to the bathroom. He didn't realize he was still mic'd up. He was talking to himself. All those things play into it as to the validity of what he said and how it was taken. Some people may argue that he knew he was on camera, so he did it on purpose, but it appears as this is very humbly him talking to himself in the bathroom.
How do you feel about that, Robert? Is it hard to defend if it's on videotape?
It's hard to defend, but my question was before that, if I could prove that the police had given any questions to ask to the directors, then my argument would be that now we have a suppression issue because the police was acting, they were acting as an agent of the police knowing they were trying to get this. But he's absolutely correct. No one expected that statement to come out of the restroom. But I'm still trying to tie the police into the production to try to get it suppressed.
Final question, because we have about a minute left. A lot of other cases are now under investigation, one in Eureka, California, another one in Vermont. Given the high-profile nature of this, is that common that you see other jurisdictions start to maybe go back 20 and 30 years and look at cases, Matt?
I think, to the extent new evidence is developed, to the extent he makes comments that are on videotape about his potential role in other crimes that may or may not have occurred in the past, it's not uncommon, I think, once an investigation becomes public, like this one is, for other cold cases or other investigations that maybe haven't gone where this one has gone, to be re-looked at, re-examined, and for prosecutors to take another look at the evidence.
Final question, if it's a yes or no answer, if I can get that from you guys. Yes or no, do you think the Durst case goes to trial and gets adjudicated here on guns and drugs before he gets extradited back to California?
I think he pleads out here.
I think he pleads out here as well.
I think it gets adjudicated here before California.
All right. Matt Chester, former federal prosecutor. Robert Jenkins, defense attorney. Mike Kahn, security expert. We could talk about this for days. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Robert Durst has another court appearance later this week. We'll obviously be covering that. For now, though, let's send it back to you on the anchor desk.